But the tip this week is, as we were riding on Spider Mountain, there was a spot where my son, the brakes went out on his mountain bike. We tried to adjust him and we thought everything was good, but the brakes went out right as he was going down this pretty steep descent. Now, the steep descent ended up with a sharp turn and a berm that, if you're not on top of it and you don't have your brakes working well, you're pretty much just going to fly right over the handlebars. And that's essentially what he did. Now he's 14, but he's still learning and he's doing great, but he could brush himself off. Nothing was broken. Hallelujah. Except for his brakes, right? So we had to go adjust those. But later on throughout the day, and this was the beginning of the morning, later on throughout the day, he was getting more and more confidence. His bike was working well again. And before we left, I just had this thought in my mind: he's got to do this one more time. He's got to take this trail where he totally, had bailed, um, one more route. And the reason being is, if we didn't, he would have left that day probably stuck and had a limiting block and belief on this part of the mountain, and really left him kind of psychologically scarred. So we did. We got to this spot again. His brakes were working just fine. And I asked him, I said, son, you want to try this again? Your brakes are working good. You can do this. I know you have the skills. I know you have the ability to do it. It comes down to here, like your psychology, getting past your fears. And he's like, no, dad, I don't want to do it. I'm like, I know you don't want to, but I think you should, because it'll help you to get past this fear of this part, section of the trail. And he said, okay. And I said, all right, then you go first. And we all followed him, and he did fantastic. He went right down. He did just fine. He did great. And we all kind of like, see, like, it wasn't you, it was really the brakes. And now you can get over that fear. So I think a lot of times in our work and our personal goals, as we're trying to achieve these things, there are limiting blocks, there are limiting beliefs, there's fear of failure, fear of success, and everything that goes with it underneath those areas that get in our own way. I'd like to ask you to share, what are those things that maybe get in your own way, and what have you done to help get over them, just like my son